Hi, my name is Tara Kachaturoff, and I'm the host of Michigan Entrepreneur, where we feature businesses from startup to stellar. Today, I have as my special guest Shakeena Melbourne, who is the principal attorney at Uptown Law. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you because, first of all, I love interviewing entrepreneurs and attorneys.
Nice.
No, I do. I really do. And today we're going to be talking about what you do at Uptown Law and what you specialize in, and we're going to dive into some of that detail. But before we do, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and what led you to getting involved with law and becoming an attorney in the first place?
So, Tara, it's a funny and yet interesting story. So apparently, my mom tells this story that I was around 3 years old, and I had a desk in my bedroom, and Barbie was fighting with Teddy on who should get the candy, and I was the judge. So I was asking them questions and trying to figure out who should get the candy. And so since then, I've been on this journey to become a lawyer. Now, where it came from, I don't know. There's no one in my family that's in the legal field or anything like that, so I'm not sure where exactly it came from. But in second grade, I had a teacher. It was a substitute teacher that day. And she, asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so I raised my hand and said, I want to be a judge. And she said, a judge? And I was like, yeah. So we studied then going forward for the next couple of weeks, figuring out a plan of action of how to actually become a judge, what kind of schooling that you had to complete. And so from second grade forward, I did all the schooling that was required, didn't stop. So by 25, I was practicing attorney. And not sure yet if I really want to be the judge part, but I do appreciate the law.
So how old are you when you're in second grade? Are you between 7
Correct.
and 10? 7?
Around about 7.
7.
Yes. Yep.
That's interesting. So that was written into your destiny.
I think so.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That's really interesting. I like looking at things like that.
Yep.
7 is a really important age.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So I've just been on this journey, and then eventually, I did different internships, studied abroad, trying to learn and understand what law, the practice areas I'm interested in, and what type of environment I'd be willing to work in, because there's so many different areas and so many different types. Eventually, by 2018, I started Uptown Law PLLC.
And that's really interesting because you did work in other law firms, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then you decided to do your own. So you kind of have different things going on. I mean, you've got the law, but you also have the entrepreneurial piece.
Correct.
Because it's very different to be plugged into working in somebody else's firm versus doing it all yourself.
Definitely.
It's a very different, it's a very different world.
You mean sleep? Where's that at?
Yeah, really.
But I understand.
So what was it that, what was it like the precipitating factor, or what was it that for you that created that opportunity where you decided, I want to start my own firm? Because that's a big step, and that takes a certain kind of mindset to do that.
Yes.
Not everybody does that. That's why there's all these big firms.
True.
So what was it?
So I have an LLM. I don't know if you're familiar. So an LLM is a master's of law, right? So you can get your Juris Doctorate, a master's of law, and there's also a PhD of law. So my master's in law is in corporate and finance. So I studied business on the legal side, at least, on how this would look. Most of my internships I did while in law school were with attorneys that were solo practitioners, meaning they owned their own law firm, or smaller firms that had about 2 to 4 attorneys. For that reason, I had an understanding, at least a little bit. In the firm that I worked at before I started Uptown Law, I learned even more about hiring, firing, insurances. What does it mean on a day-to-day to actually run a firm? So between the theoretical piece while I was in school and then the practical piece when I was in practice, it helped me to develop what I wanted, what I thought would help with the staff, what were things that I wanted to provide as a culture for the environment of the firm that I was going to create, which was Uptown Law.
And it was just that easy, right?
well, after about 6 years or so. But
yeah, but it's really interesting, and you see the little stepping stones that lead you to places. So, you know, I kind of think back to the thing about the judge and what you said about when you were younger. Maybe that stepping stone is still out there.
Yeah.
We don't know where you're going to end up. You're young and you still have, you know, you have a big career ahead of you,
yes.
a long career. So it's interesting. We may see you as a judge.
Yes. I'm going to let you stick to that story.
No, I don't know. I have this feeling. Things don't happen. Things all happen for a really good reason.
Correct.
So, and how was it that you decided to go into the area? Now, I know you cover many different areas in your law firm, but one of them is bankruptcy, which we're going to talk about today. How did you decide what you wanted to specialize in? Because law is so broad. So there's so many different areas. How did you decide?
I start with a laughter. I'm a little goofball in real life, okay? So I didn't decide. So kind of like what you were saying with destiny. So the firm I was working at before I started Uptown Law, I was supposed to start the firm doing foreclosure work because I was working at a bank prior to that doing foreclosure, forfeitures, real estate transactions. So I go to the first day of my job. Now, what do you do on the first day? You're so excited, you can't wait to start, life is great. Yeah, and then they say, hey, so there's an opening in the bankruptcy department, and we need someone to help part-time until we hire another attorney. Are you interested? It's the first day of the job. What do you say? Sure. I'll help. I know nothing about bankruptcy, never read it. I don't know anyone that has filed bankruptcy. I know squat. Probably 3 to 4 weeks in, the other attorney that's in the department got sick. So they were still trying to hire someone, and now the person in the department is gone. And everyone's like, well, you've been there a couple of weeks. You should know what's going on by now. Absolutely not.
Wow.
I went to Cooley. So I attended Cooley Law School, and at that time there was a campus nearby. And I went to Cooley and got every book that they had on bankruptcy. And for weeks, I sat there, read, studied, outlined. I needed to understand who the players are. I created like a chessboard. Who are the players? What do they do? How does this actually work? And fell in love with it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So this is a destiny story.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
that's
it's not?
I didn't decide.
Wow. That's unbelievable. And that's huge. I mean, walking into a job and then finding out your job is completely different on day one, and your whole brain has to like completely erase what you thought you were going to do, and the expectation and all the stuff you already built up to here.
Yes.
To walk. Oh my goodness.
Because it was literally starting from scratch. I knew nothing, and I actually took that as more of an opportunity than a burden. You know, you're concerned. I don't know anything. Is this a job I want to keep? Is this something I want to keep doing? And I said, no, I want to actually learn.
And talk about making a name for yourself in the firm, because you like took on this challenge.
Yes.
They saw what happened. The department fell apart. You had to carry the ball to the finish line. I mean, like, talk about, wow.
Right. And the clients we had were not individuals. So there's two types of bankruptcy attorneys. You have the ones that are representing creditors, which could be loans, banks, mortgages, vehicles, and then you have the other side where you're representing the people. Well, in this case, I was representing the creditors. So now imagine you're talking with or trying to negotiate on a deal with someone that might know more about bankruptcy than you do, and I'm the attorney. What? They've been in these bankruptcy departments for years, 5, 10, 20 years, and I'm completely fresh. But we end up building relationships. So it was an easier learning process because they discovered, oh, you are learning in the books. You do know the sections of the law. You do at least understand the system. Here's how we're going to now respond to this particular person in this particular case. Versus today in Uptown Law, we now represent people.
Right.
So I get the advantage of the skill sets I learned on the creditor side.
Right. The inside secrets.
To help the
really.
people on the other side.
Yeah. I mean, you know how they think, you know the strategies, you know the game plans because
Correct.
you worked on that side of the, it's like
Correct.
playing offense and defense. I mean, you've got both of them handled. Yeah, that's like
chess
brilliant.
game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You see, like, talk about like amazing positioning.
Correct.
And the destiny thing here. This is like amazing.
Yeah.
Because not everybody gets that other side. You don't have that other glimpse into what's going on.
Exactly.
Wow, that is amazing. So you've had. How long have you had? How long have you had Upton Law?
Since 2018.
Since
so
2018.
about 4 years in now.
Okay. And how has the journey been as an entrepreneur?
Which part?
Busy. It's been busy, right?
It's
busy.
a growth process. So think about a scale of trades. You'll see up, down, up. You might stabilize for a bit, up, down, and that's really the truth, I think, of entrepreneurship. Because another part of the firm is I actually help business owners start businesses and contracts and review documents and business strategies. So I like to tell people up front, hey, know it's a journey, period.
Right.
If you understand that, you'll understand more of when the times are high and when there's lows, because you will know that it's always going to be that way.
And the trend is generally, even though there are the dips and stuff, the trend is generally up.
Correct.
So that's a good thing, except when it's not, and then we have bankruptcy, and we have you that can also help with that.
Tara, bankruptcy is not a failure. It's the best thing
It's
in
a
the
tool.
world.
It's a
Absolutely.
tool. It's a tool. And we're going to turn the conversation for a little while to bankruptcy, which is just one of the practice areas that you specialize in.
Yes.
And before we get started in bankruptcy, which is essentially people kind of removing themselves from certain types of situations and
Yes.
reorganizing things in some cases not. What are some of the reasons, what are some of the top reasons that you see for individuals having to go and choose the bankruptcy route? Because it is something that some people you just have to do. It's not something like people do to escape things. Sometimes that's all the only option left.
Yes.
What are some of those top reasons? Like, what are a couple that you see are very common?
Okay, so garnishment, whether that is garnishing your paycheck or your tax returns, that's usually common. Foreclosure, or some form of mortgage issue like a loan modification. When it comes to a vehicle, it could be a repossession, where your car just got repoed, or it was repoed, a couple of years ago, and now the finance company is coming after you today. Lawsuits. You're being sued currently, whether that's, because an eviction is a lawsuit as well, right? So if you're being evicted, some people will file bankruptcy for that. If you have a lawsuit where a credit card company is coming back from years ago, a secured loan or unsecured loan, these, I believe, are the most common reasons someone will file, because you get to a point where your day-to-day income and expenses cannot take an additional hit for any outside debt, which is why you probably weren't likely paying it from the beginning. And now you have no choice, because they're now doing some kind of legal action against you.
Right.
And you need some kind of relief from that.
And are those mainly the folks that you're dealing with in your day-to-day in your practice?
Yes.
All right. And so there's some different kinds of bankruptcy, and I'd like to kind of go through them just a little bit about each one so that we know what they are, and then we'll go from there. So there's this is funny, there's 7, we're going to talk about 7, 11, and 13.
Okay.
So they're all odd, right, aren't they? So what's Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and how does that all work?
So Chapter 7 bankruptcy is where I like to sum it up as simple as possible, where you basically are eligible to get rid of the debts that you owe. Now, the reason I say eligible is because bankruptcy in all the chapters, I believe, are a formula. Everyone doesn't qualify. So when you do qualify, the question is, which chapter do you qualify for, right? And so Chapter 7 is one of the most common ones for a consumer, which is an individual who's filing bankruptcy. On average, that person usually has an annual income of $55,000 or less. Also, what they look at as part of the formula is your income subtracted by your monthly expenses. Does that amount that's left over, is it below $200? If it is below $200 and your annual income is likely below $55,000, you're likely to qualify for a Chapter 7. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
I did not realize it was. I did not realize that. So when they get to that point, how do they handle the creditors? Are you released from all obligation?
Correct.
Does that work for people with school loans?
No, it does not.
Right, because that
You
does-
can't see,
yeah.
Tara. You can't take away from the government and get relief from the government. That's how I try to make it as simple as possible, right? So
In the past, though, weren't people relieved of their obligations? Because I know all the people that
Yes.
went to medical school in the 70s and they just declare bankruptcy and they'd be scot-free.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then Congress came out with a law, BAP-CBA, and that kind of changed the rules to the game. That's
When did that change? When did that law come into place?
Good question. I want to say it was in the early 2000s.
Oh, so it was that late, that recent?
Correct,
Okay.
and it was
Interesting.
after the last recession, so somewhere between
okay.
07, 09, and right after that was the change in the law.
Because now, I mean, school debt, I mean, it could be a couple 100,000. I mean, for people going to law school nowadays,
Oh,
150,000,
hundreds of
200,000
thousands,
easy
correct.
for 3 years.
That is correct.
Yeah, interesting. So that's Chapter 7.
Yes.
All right, and then what is is 11 or 13 most relatable? Probably 13. Is that also for-
13. So
'cause that's also
Chapter
for
11
individuals.
is for businesses when a small business is filing bankruptcy. Chapter 13 is when a consumer is really filing bankruptcy, whether they're self-employed or not. And in a Chapter 13, though, you don't have the ability to waive or get rid of the debts that are owed.
Okay.
Instead, in a Chapter 13, it's a form of a payment plan.
Okay.
And you're making incremental payments over the life of your Chapter 13, which is somewhere between 36 months and 60 months long. And you'll be making payments to the trustee. The trustee will then disperse those funds to the creditors, and it will be on a pro rata basis, meaning a percentage of the
Right.
debts are being paid over the 36 to 60 months.
Is that percentage based on, sorry for interrupting.
No problem.
Is that percentage based upon a predetermined formula that's for everybody across the board? Is like 70% you're going to have to pay back, or is it some other combination? of
Another
things?
kind of formula.
Another formula.
The formula
Okay.
is based on, again, similar to the Chapter 7, your income versus your expenses.
Okay.
So in a case with a Chapter 13, after you have your income, you subtract all your monthly expenses. And in bankruptcy, they take heed to every expense in your life. So that includes car note, life insurance, taxes, food, clothes, personal care, all of that is calculated. After that, if that number is above $200, then they start looking at how much you can pay each month, and then how much based on that payment will be dispersed in percentage across the board to your creditors.
And that can get awful tricky if you're an entrepreneur,
Yes,
because you have unpredictable income.
that is correct. But a Chapter 13 is more flexible. They understand that, especially because you're in a 3 to 5 year process, there's some wiggle room on changing the amount you pay as you go, because
Oh, I
life
see.
happens.
Okay.
As well as in a Chapter 13, you can still get a mortgage
Okay.
while you're in the case.
Oh.
You can still buy a car while you're in the case, because they're seeing that you're making payments. You
I see. So they're looking kind of at intent and action. So when you're in
Exactly.
Chapter 7, do you lose those rights to get a mortgage, buy a car?
While you're in it, correct. Because a
Okay.
Chapter 7 is 90 days long,
Oh, okay.
versus a Chapter 13, which is 36 to 60 months long.
Okay. So they can't really stop you from living. Otherwise, that's
Correct.
that's unconscionable. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. So which ones are you working? Do you have more that, like when you're looking at 7 versus 13? Do you have a predominance of one versus the other in your firm that you're handling more of?
Typically,
Or
it would
just
be a
depends?
7, because more people, especially in like the Metro Detroit area, would qualify for a Chapter 7. But we do both 7s and 13s.
And have you seen like a huge increase since the pandemic?
No, actually.
You haven't?
I have not.
Interesting.
Bankruptcies went down during the pandemic.
Is it because they couldn't get a court date?
No.
Because, I mean, that was like a huge problem.
I think, no, the bankruptcy court has been working nonstop throughout
Really?
the pandemic because most, if not everything, for the bankruptcy court is electronic. And it has been so from at least 2010, 2012. So nothing streamlined affected the bankruptcy.
Do you have to do face-to-face?
You either do Zoom.
Oh, so they were
Or-
all like, they were already doing this.
Correct.
Oh, wow.
You do
I did not
Zoom
know that.
or phone conferences in bankruptcy court. It was recently, in the last probably month or so, one of the judges in Detroit has requested in-person meetings. But outside of that, since about maybe April or May of 2020, the bankruptcy court hasn't skipped a beat. But they're
That's
not
amazing.
open to the public
Right.
in totality. Correct.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. But that's also run at the federal level as opposed to the state. So it's
That is
different.
correct.
It's a little more streamlined.
significantly different.
Interesting.
It's more systematic, it's more clean, it's more efficient.
But you still have like court dates and times to show up.
Absolutely.
So it's not changed in that respect.
Correct.
Yeah. So you still
That's
have the
totally-
calendar.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. That's phenomenal. It's interesting. That's just so interesting.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, you can work from the office and not,
Correct.
no commuting. Yeah, that's
Yes.
amazing. Wow. So one of the things I know that comes up for people, and a very big concern when it comes to bankruptcy, is how does this impact their credit score? Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I mean, people are concerned, and it's like, am I going to spend the next 20 years like digging myself out of this and trying to get back to 700, 800? What
Absolutely not. It's the most interesting thing ever. So when you file bankruptcy, the day you file, I usually ask clients to get some kind of software or an account, whether it's Experian, Credit Karma, one of those agencies, so you can monitor your credit throughout this process. You can also see the changes. So on the day that the case is filed, the credit score will drop. It's no different than the day you were filing for or applying for a mortgage. Once that hard inquiry comes on your account, on your credit report, your score decreases. So it's the same, right? In a Chapter 7, during that 90-day period, what's happening on your credit is these creditors, or the companies, are updating their accounts and reporting back to the credit bureau that you filed, and they have to get rid of those things off of your credit report. Follow me? So
that's a good thing.
Correct. So after the 90 days is over, usually so 90 days is about 3 months, right? So usually by month 6 of filing your bankruptcy, you'll start to see an enormous increase on your credit score.
I see.
So I've had clients that would have started, sorry, I like my hat. I seen individuals or clients of mine that would start with a credit score of, let's say, 550. In 6 months to 9 months after filing a Chapter 7, have a credit score of 750. How's that possible? Remember, bankruptcy is removing the debt.
You're right.
So when the FICO score is being calculated, that's one piece that was holding you down, causing your credit score to be lower, like a repossession, and the balance that you owe on that car that was $30,000 or $20,000 that's sitting on your credit report, it's now gone on the actual FICO score calculator, and that's how the credit score increases.
I see. So it's not damaging people for life and for years and years. Okay.
Absolutely not.
That's great.
Everything on your credit score technically restarts every 7 years. So whether it is a hard inquiry for a mortgage company or that repossession that's on your credit report, that's still there for 7 years.
Oh, I see.
So the bankruptcy is still on your credit report for 7 years.
And then that disappears.
Exactly.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Interesting. Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
And so how do people come to find you, and how do they come to get involved with you so that you can help them through this process? Because obviously it's not something somebody wants to do on their own. How do you get the word out?
A lot of times, really, it's person to person. You would have worked with me, you thought it was great, or the experience was great, or you felt peace of mind. One of the things I like to promote is you'll be able to sleep tonight. Because literally, the day you press the button on that bankruptcy and file it is the day your life shifts. So all the days prior to, you probably couldn't sleep at night, you're worried, are the kids gonna know, is the family gonna know, am I a failure? All these bills are piling up on me, right? That happens. And then the day you file. Within 7 to 10 days after filing that case, all your creditors receive a letter that tells them that you filed bankruptcy and they need to update their systems. Many banks, loans, and finance companies actually get a bankruptcy alert electronically, so they'll know the same day.
Oh, okay.
Right? Or within 24 hours. So what happens now is no more collection calls. Can you imagine the day and your phone isn't ringing anymore and now you know who's calling you? Because the only people calling is people you know? Wow. No more letters. Your mailbox, you're not afraid to run to the mailbox to go check your mail because there's no more collection.
And they legally
letters.
have to stop.
Correct.
Okay.
By law, they have to
right.
stop. When you get an attorney, that attorney becomes, I like to call it your gatekeeper.
Okay.
Your creditors got to talk to me to get to you. Another reason why your phone stops ringing. We then get to have a conversation. Hey, sorry, such and such, sent an email or a call. What would you like to do with this? Oh, I don't want it.
Okay, so you just do intermediary.
Correct.
You do intermediary. I see.
Because what happens is, I like to put it like this. When you file bankruptcy, or prior to filing bankruptcy, you're at the table with another customer service representative, right? So you're gonna call the 1-800 number, I don't have it this month, I'm trying to come up with a plan or something. You're not at the table though with the creditor, just someone that works there. Right? But when you file bankruptcy, you bring the creditor to the table. Every company in the state of Michigan must be represented by counsel whenever there's a legal proceeding.
Oh, okay. That changed the whole
So
game.
now I get to talk to someone who can break down the account, tell me the history of it, a ledger. Now I can get the information that I need. That's what makes it a little more flexible to now work with your debt.
And I wish that we had more time to talk more about this because it's so interesting, but we're going to have you back on again in the future and talk about one of your books that is on the topic of bankruptcy and debt, right?
Yes.
So we're going to wrap this up with just one more question. What's your advice to entrepreneurs when it comes to what you do?
Don't give up. There are days when it's going to be hard, rough, tough, you're questioning, anxiety, is it going to work? It's going to work. You just have to believe it by not giving up.
All right, well said. I want to thank you, Shakeena Melbourne, Principal Attorney at Uptown Law. Thank you for being a guest, and we'll see you again in the future.
Yes, thank you.
Right. If you'd like more information about our program, please visit us at www.michiganentrepreneurtv.com. Please join me again in the future when I interview another enterprising entrepreneur. Until then, wishing you the best of business.